Okay, so here I have the first couple pieces that I'm going to Mod Podge, and I have my Mod Podge. Again, you can do it with Elmer's glue if you want, or whatever knockoff Crazy Arts craft glue or whatever. But like I said, I've been doing this long enough that I choose to use my Mod Podge. So I've got a broad bristled brush. Know that this is a tribute. He is not going to survive this. I don't paint with this brush. I only use it at this point for glue and Mod Podge based stuff. So pick a crappy brush that you don't want that's got broad brush bristles because it makes it easier. I'm going to dip it right down there in the stuff. Get all of the ferrules, whatever. And I'm just going to begin to brush it on. I don't think it's toxic. I don't know. I get it on my hands all the time. So it does accumulate, and that's not great. So you do want to pay attention. You don't want to lay it on too thickly. You just want to work it into all the cracks, you know, and spot check your work. Make sure it's not pooling anywhere. This is where we run into some issues with the bullet holes. The Mod Podge surface tension is pretty high, so it will just skin over bullet holes if you don't mind to them. It's not the end of the world. You can just take a toothpick and, you know, poke it in there. So it's not, you know, it's not going to like ruin the bullet hole. It does cause a little bit of a problem. You might have to do a little touch painting if some of the green or pink or blue or whatever shows through. I'm going to do my best to get 2 to 3 sides on each piece. And I'm going to lay them out so that they've got lots of space for airflow. And then I am going to turn my fan on them. My fan has currently been drying off some of the alcohol from my 3D printed pieces. You might be able to hear it whirring in the background. I find that if I don't use that fan, especially when it's as cold as it is right now where I live, then it takes a long time for the alcohol to evaporate fully. So it just speeds up my process a little bit. But I'm going to turn that on the Mod Podge, make sure I give them plenty of space for airflow. And then I'll come back after lunch or maybe after dinner. You know, I really want to make sure that these... Wow, that flung all the way across the table. You can see the dot up there. This is why I don't work on a table that I care about, because it makes a mess. I used to put black paint into it, which was a recommendation. And the problem is I would flick it without realizing it, and it would get on everything. So it got on my jeans, it got on the wall. You know, you don't even realize it until afterward because it's a fairly quick process, but also you've got so many pieces to tile that it's difficult to not give in to the pressure to rush a little bit, which you don't really want to do, but I completely understand it, having done it many times myself. And then it gets everywhere. So the clear coat version at least can just be picked off the wall or whatever it gets onto, and it doesn't really matter. They do sell different colors. I think black, gray, brown, and then the translucent white one that I'm using. The other thing you could do is if you want to have a dye and just get to that base coating process early, you could mix some black acrylic paint in. I've done that in the past. I just find it's not worth it ultimately, you know. The point of the Mod Podge, if you're not sure, is it firms up and seals the pores in the foam, and it makes it easier to paint. Some people will spray paint these once they've been Mod Podged. I personally find that if I do that, I need to put at least 2 coats on, 2 heavy coats, or else inevitably some of the spray paint vapors get through. And if you're not familiar with that, it melts the styrofoam, which is a big bummer. So I like to avoid that. Last thing, before I forget and before it's too late, is I bought a $5 bag of construction sand at the beginning of the pandemic. And I still have not even gone through this one little Tupperware, but I will sprinkle very lightly some sand onto these and some gravel pieces. It helps give it a more naturalistic texture. I've been working from this thing for 3 years now. Wow. Pandemic feels like it's both 10 years long and only a couple months, doesn't it? It's weird. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to cut the video here because there's no reason to watch me Mod Podge every single piece in this little terrain modular set. But I'll come back when it's all dried up, and I've already done the back coat because there's no reason to watch me duplicate my actions. And then I'll show you about the base coating and dry brushing, and then we'll be done. Okay, so the next step after we have battle damaged is to black out all the pieces of terrain. So the things that are here in the background, pardon the wobbly camera, I lent my tripod to another teacher. they're all gonna look like this. So I've used just basic acrylic paint, you know, your average apple barrel matte black. It's like $2.50, $3 per bottle. That'll get you through several sets of this stuff. And I just coat it. You know, I do one half and then flip it, do the other half, turn a fan on, and it will dry pretty quickly, pretty reasonable. So this is probably, this and the Mod Podge are the longest steps because you've got so much dry time involved. You can do 2 coats to really firm it up, but I don't personally think it's necessary because I'm not being too rough with the terrain. But it's, you know, something to keep in mind. So you can already see those awful looking dents and dinges. Now, when it's all blacked out in single tone and not the reflective green, it starts to look kind of like beat up cement already. So that's it for this step. I didn't want to record the whole thing because it's tedious. I'm just painting these pieces, right? And I've got the last batch drying here in the background because honestly, I finally ran out of black paint after like a year. So we've got these pieces drying in the background. I got to do one more coat on those. And then we're going to switch over to, I think it's called Overbrushing Gray on. And that will form the basis to get it looking like this. So we've got 1, 2, 3 steps left. The overbrushing gray, the dry brushing the mid-tone gray, and then the highlighting with a white or a very light gray. And it'll go from this to this real quickly. So that's it. Let's pop to the next one. Okay, so now we're going to begin overbrushing. And to do that, I'm going to pick this pewter gray. I find it's got just the right consistency in color over the black to make it look really like cement. And I'm going to use this big makeup brush that I bought in a $5 kit. Works as a great overbrushing for covering big areas very quickly. So I'm going to set the camera up so that you can watch me do a couple pieces just so you can see the process. And then we'll jump into the next step, which will be the midtones. So I am going to begin to pull the paint down in light but firm brush strokes like this. And you can see it's going on there. It's starting to get the right tone. And to really make it look like poured concrete, I have found that if I start to circle the brush for this particular layer, it really makes it stand out. And just get all the edges that need to be shown. You don't need to do the bottom edge, you know, and like with every other step, we are just going to accept the happy accidents and not worry too much about what doesn't go right. There we go. We already have a wall now. So I'll do one more. I'll do a pillar. You know, I don't even need to put more paint on the brush because when you're overbrushing, you've got enough on there. Unlike with dry brushing, you don't need to refresh it as often. If you start noticing that you've got a piece that's just coming out and it's like it's not lightening up the way that you want, well, then it's time to go back, you know, and pull some more. There you go. Streaks are okay in poured concrete. It's not perfect. You know, it's not polished stone. It's supposed to look kind of brutalist. And remember, we're going for this bombed out looking futuristic ruin anyway. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to process the remainder of these pieces. You know, I'm not spending too much time on any one piece. I'm not trying to make them look perfect. I'm just trying to make them look gray. And when I come back, I'm going to have very gray hands because I elected not to grab a glove for this. But I will also have a very gray set of terrain. And the neat thing about overbrushing like this is if you've got some air circulation in the basement or wherever it is you're painting, by the time that you come back to it, it will be ready for the mid-tone layer. Okay, that's it.